Adult brothers abandoned me to foster parents after mom and dad's death. Now they're begging for forgiveness and financial help after my success. Be me. Lost my mom when I was 11. It happened so fast. One morning she was there. By evening she wasn't. Drunk driver hit her car. Remember sitting in the hospital waiting room. Nurses talking in whispers around me. My two older brothers were there. Thomas, 25, and Richard, 21. They didn't seem as shaken as me. Maybe because they were older. Or maybe they'd already started pulling away from our family. Thomas had his own place in downtown. Richard was living at university. I was just a kid. Everything I knew about family disappeared that day. Thought my brothers would step up at the funeral. I mean, they were adults. Thomas had this nice apartment in the city. Richard shared a place with his college buddies. Expected one of them to take me in, or at least offer. Instead, overheard them talking about arrangements. That's how I found out I wasn't staying with either of them. Next week, a social worker showed up. She was nice enough. But all I could focus on was that my brothers didn't want me. They had their excuses. Thomas said he wasn't ready to be a full-time guardian. Richard claimed he couldn't handle school and raising a kid. I was just a scared kid who lost his mom. The way they avoided eye contact said everything. They didn't want the responsibility. Got shuffled into foster care without much ceremony. Thomas signed some papers, patted me on the shoulder, said he'd visit. Spoiler, he didn't. Foster care was a mixed experience. First placement wasn't great. Family saw me as a walking paycheck. They didn't hit me or anything, but they were cold. Had all the basics covered. Food was always in the fridge. Meals came right on schedule, but the house felt like an icebox. Foster parents only spoke when necessary. Had two older kids of their own. Made it crystal clear I wasn't part of their family. Spent most days alone in my room. Had mom's old photo album with me. One of the few things I managed to take when I left. Brothers started calling after a couple months. Was excited at first. Thought maybe they regretted their decision. Maybe they'd change their minds. But the calls were painful. They'd ask the most generic questions possible. How's school going? Are you eating enough? Then long, awkward silences. They never actually listened to my answers. Started dreading those calls. Felt like they were doing it just because they had to. When I was 13, got brave enough to ask Thomas. Asked him why he didn't take me in. He sighed like I was being difficult. I was just starting my career, man. It wasn't the right time. Richard gave me the same BS when I asked him. Had no idea how to raise a kid. Wouldn't have been fair to either of us. Didn't know how to argue back then. But their words stuck with me. It was never about fairness. They just didn't want me. Years went by. Learned not to expect anything from family. Calls became less frequent. Went from monthly to maybe twice a year. Started giving shortest answers possible. Yeah, school's fine. No, don't need anything. Thanks for calling, I guess. Eventually, they stopped calling completely. Honestly didn't care anymore. By 15, hated all of them. Brothers, aunts, uncles, they were all the same. Didn't care about me when it mattered. So why should I care about them? Got lucky with my second foster family at 14. The Wilsons weren't perfect, but they actually tried. Mrs. Wilson had infinite patience. Mr. Wilson treated me like his own kid. They had two younger children. We weren't super close, but they didn't treat me like an outsider. First time in years I felt some stability. Stayed with them until I turned 18. Grateful for everything they did, but couldn't shake the bitterness toward my real family. Every holiday hit different. Every birthday made me wonder, why didn't anyone fight for me? Why wasn't I worth it to them? When I hit 21, made a decision. Was completely done with all of it. Brothers tried reaching out few times. Ignored their calls. Didn't want their fake apologies or their BS excuses. Was tired of being the kid they threw away. Packed everything I owned. Left town without telling anyone. Didn't even leave a note. Wanted a fresh start. A life where my family's choices didn't define me. Starting over wasn't simple, but it was worth every struggle. Moved to a small city in Oregon. Found work and started building my life. When people asked about family, just said we're not close and changed the subject. Easier that way. Nobody needed to know about those years. Years spent feeling like I wasn't enough. Looking back now, don't know if I'll ever forgive my brothers. Maybe they thought they were doing right, or maybe they were just selfish. Either way, they made their choice, and I made mine. Decided their neglect wouldn't define me anymore. For first time in forever. Had control over my own life. That was enough. Starting over at 21 felt both freeing and terrifying. Packed everything into one beat-up duffel bag. Took a bus to a city I'd only seen in pictures. Didn't know a single person there? That was exactly what I wanted. Needed a clean slate, where nobody knew me as the kid who got left behind. Had barely any plan. Just enough money for a few weeks. Figured I'd work it out somehow. First months were rough. Stayed in this cheap hostel downtown. Living on cup noodles and dollar store snacks. Took any job I could find. Washing dishes. Unloading trucks at midnight. Cleaning offices before dawn. just trying to keep lights on. Barely slept those days, partly because hostel was like a war zone at night, mostly because couldn't stop overthinking, wondering if I'd made the right choice. Sometimes thought about reaching out to brothers. Then remembered those pathetic phone calls, their endless excuses, how they bailed when I needed them. That kept me moving forward. Things started looking up eventually. Got a job at this family-owned restaurant, kind of place where regulars knew your order by heart. Tips were mostly quarters and wrinkled bills, but it was steady work. Owner Mrs. Chen reminded me of Mrs. Wilson. Tough but caring, always telling me to eat more, making sure I wasn't getting into trouble. Secretly appreciated it. Been a while since anyone cared enough to nag. Working there gave me something I hadn't felt in years, real stability. Made friends with some regulars, like Christopher, who ran the bookshop next door, and Olivia, who was always studying for her med school exams. First time in forever felt like I belonged somewhere. Nobody asked about my past. Just knew me as the guy with the bad jokes, and perfect timing on food delivery. It was more than enough. At 24, everything changed. That's when I met Lily. She came in during this massive storm, looking like she'd swum to work. Her umbrella had given up on life. She was running late for some meeting. Still stopped to order chamomile tea. When I handed it to her, she smiled and said, "Thanks for not judging my drowned rat look." Told her she was the most elegant drowned rat we'd had all day. She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. Started coming in more after that. We'd chat whenever she stopped by. She was 28, bit older than me. Worked as an interior designer. Had this confidence about her, like she knew exactly who she was. Didn't care what anyone thought. Found it refreshing, especially after spending years feeling like I had to prove myself. To people who never cared anyway. After a few weeks, worked up courage to ask her out. To my surprise, she said yes. First date was simple but perfect. Got tacos from this food truck in the park, the one with the string lights and wooden benches. Talked for hours about everything and nothing. She told me about growing up as an only child, about her parents who absolutely adored her, how she always dreamed of traveling to Japan. Told her about working at the restaurant, my dream of opening my own place someday. Kept quiet about family stuff though, just said we weren't close. Left it at that. She didn't push for more. Seemed to understand I wasn't ready to talk. Appreciated that about her, at least in the beginning. Our relationship moved pretty fast. After a year, started talking about living together. I'd saved enough to move out of my tiny room into a small studio apartment. But Lily's place was way nicer. Ended up moving in with her. Felt weird at first, living with someone who was so close to their family. Her parents would call every other day, just to chat about random stuff. What we had for dinner, new restaurant we tried, even small things like getting new curtains. Wasn't used to that kind of openness. Always kept things to myself. But Lily was patient with me. She'd invite me to family dinners and holiday celebrations. Felt like an outsider at first. Her parents really tried though. Her dad could talk to anyone about anything. Mom always cooked enough to feed whole neighborhood. It was nice in a way, but also made me feel off. Like I was seeing something I never had, and probably never would. After a while, Lily started bringing up my family. Don't you think it would be nice to have them in your life again? She asked one night over pasta, nearly choked on my food. Not really, I said. She looked surprised. But they're your family, she said. Like that meant something. Told her I didn't want to talk about it. She dropped it, or at least I thought she did. Looking back now, think Lily genuinely believed she was helping. She grew up in this perfect little family, where everyone supported each other. Couldn't understand why anyone would cut ties with blood relatives. To her, family was everything. To me, family was just a reminder of every time I'd been let down. Things were good for a while. Lily stopped bringing up my family. Let myself believe she finally got it. We started talking about future stuff. Marriage, kids, maybe buying a house someday. Felt like we were building something real, something I could actually count on. For first time ever, thought I'd found my happy ending, but you know what they say. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. It started with a text message. Didn't recognize the number. Almost ignored it. Curiosity got the better of me. Opened it anyway. Message read something like, "Hey, it's been a long time. Know this is out of nowhere, but really want to catch up." Name at the bottom made my blood freeze. Thomas, my oldest brother. First thought it was spam or something. Thomas wouldn't reach out after all these years, right? Read the message again. He mentioned specific things. Stuff about Mom. About our old neighborhood on Oak Street. Things only my brother would know. Stomach turned to ice. How did he get my number? Stared at that message forever. Part of me wanted to throw phone across room. Another part wanted to call and scream at him. Did neither. Just blocked the number. Thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Later that night, brought it up to Lily. "You won't believe who texted me today." Tried to keep my voice casual. She looked up from her laptop. had this weird, guilty look. "Oh," she said quietly. "I was going to tell you about that." Felt like floor disappeared. "Tell me about what?" She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "I gave him your number," she admitted. World stopped spinning. "You what?" "I just thought," she started. Cut her off right there. "Thought what?" "That I wouldn't notice? That it was okay to ignore everything I told you? I thought maybe if you talked to him, you'd realize it's not as bad as you think." She said it like she was being reasonable. "You've been holding onto this anger for so long. I just wanted to help you move past it." "Help me?" I snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Her face crumpled. Didn't care. Couldn't believe she'd gone behind my back. After all the times I told her how I felt. About my family. Thought she understood. Clearly I was wrong. She tried explaining herself. Said she only wanted to help. That she didn't mean any harm. Didn't matter what her intentions were. She crossed a line. Couldn't look past it. "I can't do this," I told her. "We're done." Her eyes went wide. "You're breaking up with me over this?" "It's not just this. It's the fact that you don't respect me enough to listen. Told you how I felt. You went behind my back anyway. Can't be with someone who thinks they know better than me. About my own life." She started crying. Made me even angrier. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "Didn't mean to hurt you. Please, let's talk about this. We can fix it. Didn't want to talk anymore. Said everything I needed to say. You need to move out." Told her to take whatever time she needed, but wanted her gone. She cried harder, begging me to reconsider. My mind was made up. Trust is everything in a relationship. Once it's broken, there's no going back. Not for me. Next few days were like walking through fog. Lily moved her stuff out one box at a time. Tried to avoid being there while she packed. Too painful to watch. Even though knew I'd made right choice. Her parents started calling. Made everything worse. Left voicemail after voicemail. Saying Lily was heartbroken. That she didn't understand why I was being so harsh. They kept arguing she had good intentions. That she didn't deserve to be punished for one mistake. But it wasn't just one mistake. It was a complete betrayal of trust. If they couldn't understand that, there was no point trying to explain. Blocked their numbers too. One night, about a week after she left, sat on the couch, staring at empty space where her bookshelf used to be. Had this weird mix of emotions. Anger. Sadness. Relief. Part of me missed her. Another part was glad she was gone. Couldn't shake the feeling this breakup was inevitable. Sooner or later, her idea of family and mine were bound to clash. Looking back now, think Lily truly believed she was helping. She thought she was fixing something broken. What she didn't understand? Some things don't need fixing. Some things are better left alone. Didn't need closure with my brothers. Didn't need to forgive them. Or have some heart-to-heart. All I needed was the peace of knowing I controlled my own life. Lily couldn't see that. And in the end, that's what drove us apart. After she moved out, thought things would calm down. Was wrong about that. Drama just got worse. Lily's parents kept trying to get involved. Even after I blocked their numbers, they found ways to get messages to me. One day, they actually showed up at the restaurant. Had no idea until Mrs. Chen came to the back. "There's a couple asking for you. They seem upset." Heart sank immediately. Knew exactly who it was. Walked out to find them there, looking like they'd stepped out of a family magazine cover. Her mom had tears in her eyes. Dad looked ready to give me lecture of the century. "We just want to talk," her dad said. Soon as he saw me, sighed deeply. "I'm at work. This isn't the time or place." "Well, you haven't given us much choice." Her mom's voice was shaking. "You blocked our numbers." And Lily is devastated. "You won't even hear her out." "There's nothing to hear." Tried keeping my voice level. She broke my trust. End of story. Her dad stepped forward, trying to intimidate me. "Do you know how much she's been crying?" She made a mistake, but she didn't do it out of malice. She cares about you. She was only trying to help. Had to take a deep breath, trying not to lose it. "Look," I said. "I'm sorry she's hurting, but that doesn't change what happened. I made my boundaries clear, and she ignored them. That's not something I can just get over. But you're throwing away years of relationship over one incident." Her mom was practically begging. "She's in therapy now, you know. She's trying to understand why she did what she did. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It doesn't change what she did. I need you to leave now. Not discussing this anymore." Mrs. Chen must have sensed trouble. Came out from the kitchen. Gently but firmly told them they had to go. Felt bad she had to get involved, but grateful she had my back. As they left, her dad muttered something. About me being cold and ungrateful? Just shook my head. Went back to work. That wasn't the end, though. Lily herself started sending letters. Ignored them at first. Didn't even open the first few. Just threw them in the trash. One day, curiosity won. Opened one. She apologized again for what she'd done. Said she regretted crossing my boundaries. Wished she could take it back. But then doubled down on her reasoning. Still believed I needed to confront my past. I just wanted you to have the chance to heal. She wrote, I didn't mean to hurt you. I was trying to help. Reading that letter made my blood boil. Wasn't even about the apology. That part was fine. It was how she kept framing it. Like she knew better than me about my own life. That's what made me furious. She didn't understand. Her version of help was exactly what I didn't need. Didn't respond to her letters. Didn't see the point. Clear we'd never see eye to eye. Dragging it out would just make things worse. Focused on work after all that. Tried rebuilding my routine without her. Some days were easier than others. There were moments when I'd almost reach for phone, to text her or call her, just to see how she was doing. But knew better. Once trust is broken, it's basically impossible to fix. Around this time, my brothers started getting more persistent. Blocking Thomas's number wasn't enough. They found me on social media too. Had deleted my accounts years ago, but apparently Thomas got Richard involved. Richard wasn't blocked yet. Got a message from him. We need to talk. Deleted it without replying. But message stuck in my head for days. What did they want? Why now? Couldn't shake the feeling that Lily's meddling had opened a door I'd worked hard to keep shut. Made me resent her all over again, even though knew I was the one who had to deal with it now. Finally decided to send Richard one last message. Kept it short and clear. I'm not interested in talking. Please stop contacting me. Blocked him immediately after. Thought that would be the end. Was wrong again? One night I was sitting in my apartment. Got a knock on the door. Wasn't expecting anyone. Hesitated before opening. When I finally did, was stunned to see Thomas standing there. What are you doing here? Asked him coldly. I just want to talk. He held up his hands, like he was surrendering. Can I come in? No. Said it flat out. Whatever you need to say, you can say it here. He looked taken aback, but nodded anyway. Look, I know you're mad at me and Richard. I get it. We should have done more when Mom died. We screwed up, but we've been trying to make it right. And you keep shutting us out. Crossed my arms. You had 10 years to make it right. Why now? He hesitated. We didn't know how to reach you. Then Lily reached out. She told us what happened. Got us thinking. We just want a chance to fix things. Hearing him say her name felt like punch to the gut. Lily had no right to get involved, said through clenched teeth. And you have no right to show up here uninvited? I've made it clear. I don't want to talk to you? Thomas's face fell, but I didn't care anymore. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For everything. I miss my little brother. Should have thought about that. Before you abandoned him. Shut the door in his face. Couldn't sleep that night. Seeing Thomas brought everything back. All those memories I tried to bury. Being that scared, lonely kid. Wondering why nobody wanted him. Reminded me exactly why I cut ties. Some people don't deserve second chances. After Thomas showed up, knew I had to make changes. Blocking numbers and ignoring messages. Wasn't enough anymore. My family had this way of creeping back in. No matter how clear I made it, that I wanted nothing to do with them. Felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for next message, or knock at the door. Hated feeling that way, like I wasn't in control of my own life. First thing I did was talk to my landlord, explain the situation, left out some details, asked if there was any way to get out of my lease early. He wasn't happy about it, but after I offered to cover an extra month's rent, he agreed, started looking for a new place immediately, focused on neighborhoods, far from where Thomas might think to look. Found a small studio apartment, other side of town. Within a week. Wasn't much, but it was mine. Most importantly, it was a fresh start. Packing up my old place was weird, kind of bittersweet. Much as I wanted to leave, this apartment had been my first real home, after foster care, where I'd started rebuilding my life, piece by piece, where I met Lily, where I'd thought for a while that I could finally have something stable. Leaving felt like closing a chapter, one that had been both painful and hopeful in its own way. Moving helped more than expected. Being a new place, with new surroundings, gave me this sense of freedom. Hadn't felt in a long time. First time in weeks. Could actually breathe again. Threw myself into work. Picked up extra shifts at the restaurant. Started saving up for future. Mrs. Chen noticed I was working harder. Pulled me aside one day. You okay? She asked. Eyes full of concern. Yeah, I said. Tried to smile. Just keeping busy. She didn't push, but could tell she didn't fully believe me. Still, her kindness meant a lot. Reminded me not all relationships had to be complicated or painful. Some people just cared because they wanted to. No strings attached. Lily didn't give up right away. Even after moving, got couple more letters from her. Forwarded to my new address. Didn't bother opening them. Knew whatever she had to say. Wouldn't change anything. Made my decision. Wasn't going to second guess it. Kept telling myself, trust was the foundation of any relationship. Once it's broken, there's no going back. It was hard though. Some nights would lie awake, thinking about good times we had. Wonder if I'd been too harsh. But deep down knew I hadn't. What she did wasn't just a mistake. Was a fundamental disregard for who I was and what I needed. As for my brothers, didn't hear from them again after Thomas's visit. Whether they'd finally gotten the message or were just waiting for right moment to try again. Didn't know. Honestly didn't care. More time passed. More I realized how much lighter I felt without them in my life. Wasn't carrying around that anger anymore. That resentment, not because I'd forgiven them, but because I'd finally accepted that I didn't need them. Their opinions, their guilt trips, their attempts to reconnect, none of it mattered. Was done letting them have power over me. One day, about 6 months after Lily and I split, got an email from someone unexpected. Old friend I hadn't talked to in years. Guy named Marcus. Met him during my time in foster care. He'd been couple years older than me. Lost touch after he aged out of system. Seeing his name in my inbox was surprising, but in a good way. In his email, Marcus said he'd moved to my city, working as a mechanic now. Asked if I wanted to grab coffee, catch up sometime. Hesitated at first. Letting someone from my past back in felt risky, especially after everything. But Marcus wasn't like my brothers, or Lily. He knew what it was like. Growing up without safety net, having to figure everything out alone. So I replied, set up time to meet. Seeing Marcus again was like stepping back into a world I'd almost forgotten. We talked for hours, sharing stories about foster families, laughing about dumb stuff we did as kids. He told me about his struggles, finding stable work after aging out, how he finally got his life together. Told him about my job at restaurant, my dream of opening my own place. At one point, Marcus leaned back in his chair. You've done good for yourself, man. I'm proud of you. Caught me off guard. Wasn't used to hearing that from anyone, let alone someone who knew the darker parts of my past, but it meant more than I could put into words. Over next few months, Marcus and I became close friends again. Having someone who understood my past, who didn't judge or try to fix me, was a game changer. He reminded me that family isn't always about blood. It's about people who show up when it counts. With his encouragement, started thinking seriously about my future. Had been saving up for years, while wasn't anywhere near ready to open my own restaurant. The dream didn't feel as impossible anymore. For first time in long time, felt like I was building something real, something that was entirely mine. Looking back now, cutting ties with Lily and my brothers was one of hardest decisions I ever made, but it was also one of the best. It taught me about boundaries, about standing up for what I need, not letting anyone guilt me into compromising that. Don't regret the choices I made. Even though they were painful, they brought me to where I am now, a place where I can finally start moving forward. As for my family, I wish them well, but I don't need them in my life. Learned that some relationships aren't worth saving, and that's okay. Not every story needs happy ending. Sometimes best thing you can do is walk away. Focus on building life you deserve. Know what I learned from all this? Real family isn't about whose blood. It's about who sticks around. When things get tough, it's about people like Mrs. Chen, who check on you without wanting anything back. People like Marcus, who understand your past without trying to change it. Those are the relationships worth keeping. The ones that let you be yourself, without conditions or expectations. Maybe that's the real happy ending. Not the one I expected, but the one I needed. Building my own kind of family, one person at a time, on my own terms. And honestly, that's more than enough.